Hello, my name is Joe. I'm 75 years old, and today I want to share a little about my life. It's not an extraordinary story, but it's mine, and I think there's something worth telling. You see, I spent most of my life buried in books, studying languages, reading literature, exploring myths and stories from different corners of the world. But despite my passion for learning, I never achieved much in the professional field. My career didn't follow the path I had hoped for, and while I was content, I sometimes wonder what could have been. I married young, raised children, and now I have grandchildren, and I'm proud of them all. They've done what I couldn't. I watched them grow, accomplish things, and find their way in the world. As for me, I didn't seek fame or success. I found solace in the pages of books, in the beauty of words, and in the mysteries of the past. As I grew older, I retired. My days became quieter, filled with moments of reflection. But I wasn't ready to fade away. I didn't need to be in the spotlight, but I did miss the joy of sharing the knowledge I'd accumulated. That's when I found my new calling at the local library. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't what I expected in my later years, but it was exactly what I needed. Now, I spend my days in the library, recommending books to those who come in looking for something to read. It's a quiet life, and I find peace in it. I take my seat by the entrance every morning, ready to offer suggestion to anyone who asks. It could be a novel, a history book, or something about an ancient myth, and I'd happily share what I know. I read constantly, lost in worlds that others may never know. And when someone finds the right book, I feel a sense of quiet satisfaction, like I've helped them find a treasure. I'm not sure what I expected out of life. I spent so many years chasing knowledge and studying the past that I didn't think much about what might come next. But now I realize this is enough. It may not be grand, but these small moments, sharing stories, recommending books, guiding someone to their next adventure, are the things that matter most. And as I sit here in my chair by the window, I know I've found my place. Every day was monotonous, but I liked it. There was a certain comfort in the routine, a calmness that settled over me as I followed the same path, day in and day out. I would wake up early, have my cup of coffee, and head to the library. It wasn't a grand or exciting life, but it was mine, and that simplicity brought me a kind of peace I hadn't known before. The library was my sanctuary. The smell of old books, the sound of pages turning, the quiet hum of people lost in their own worlds. It all felt familiar. I'd sit behind the counter, greeting the few regulars who came in, and occasionally helping someone find exactly what they were looking for. It was a job that didn't require much, but it allowed me to do what I loved most, be around books. I'd read when there was nothing to do. My eyes would wander across the shelves, picking out stories that caught my attention. It didn't matter if they were about history, philosophy, or fiction. They all intrigued me in their own way. And when someone asked for a recommendation, I would be happy to suggest something I thought they might enjoy, or perhaps something they hadn't considered before. My children and grandchildren would come by occasionally, but they all had their own busy lives. I understood that, of course. They would check in with me, and I would share my latest book finds or stories from the past, as I had so many to tell. But for the most part, I was content on my own. Monotony, they say, is the enemy of excitement, but for me it was a friend. Every week, my children and grandchildren would come to visit, and I'd find myself looking forward to those moments more than anything else. The sound of their laughter, the way their faces lit up as they walked through the door, it brought a joy that was hard to describe. I'd greet them warmly, happy to see the familiar faces, even if it felt like I was getting older with each passing day. My grandchildren, full of energy and curiosity, would often gather around me, eager to hear stories from my younger days. They'd ask about my travels, about the books I read, about the myths and legends I studied so deeply. I enjoyed telling them the stories, watching as their eyes widened with wonder at the tales of far-off lands and ancient civilizations. To them, I was a bridge to a time they would never know, and that made me feel important in a way that I hadn't felt for a long time. I'd sit with them, telling them stories I had learned over the years, and sometimes they'd bring their own little tales, funny things they'd experienced at school or with friends. Those moments were my treasure, far more valuable than any book I had read or any lesson I had learned in my lifetime. time with my family was a reminder of the connections I had, of the love that had endured through the years. After they left, I'd feel a pleasant warmth in my heart that lasted for days. It was always a bit quieter around the house after their visit, but the joy of those moments would linger long after the door had closed behind them. They were a reminder that, even in my advanced age, life still held surprises and pleasures, simple yet deeply meaningful. One weekday, as I wandered around the library, my mind settled into its usual rhythm. The job, simple as it was, had become a comfortable part of my routine. I'd walk the aisles, check the shelves, ensure everything was in order. My responsibility was to keep an eye out, make sure visitors didn't take books they shouldn't, and maintain the quiet, peaceful atmosphere the library was known for. As I passed by the folding room, I noticed something odd. One of the books on the shelf was not aligned properly, standing out against the neatly organized spines of the others. It wasn't like the usual small disarray that could happen when someone hastily pulled a book from a shelf. No, this one was intentionally placed just slightly askew, as though someone had meant for it to be that way. Curious, I stepped closer. My fingers grazed the spine of the book, and as I did, I noticed something unusual underneath it, a lever hidden just beneath the edge. Without thinking much of it, I gave it a small pull. To my surprise, the side wall of the shelf began to shift. It moved with subtle creak, revealing a small gap in the otherwise solid wood. My heart skipped a beat, and I immediately grabbed my flashlight from my pocket, shining it into the new opening. There before me, hidden from view for who knows how long, was an entire secret room, tucked away behind the bookshelves. The room was small, dimly lit by the faint glow of my flashlight, but was unmistakably filled with books, old, leather-bound volumes, stacked neatly on shelves just like those in the main part of the library. I stood there for a moment, taken aback by what I had found. The room was silent, untouched. The air smelled musty, like time itself had been trapped inside. But the most curious part was that these books were different from those in the library. They weren't cataloged in the same way. There was no system I could recognize, no order. It was as if they were kept hidden on purpose. I carefully stepped inside, my feet moving cautiously across the old wooden floorboards. My mind raced with questions. How long had this room been here? Who else knew about it? And more importantly, why had it been kept a secret? I ran my fingers over the spines of the books, wondering if any of them held knowledge or stories lost to the world. The thought of the hidden secrets they might contain both intrigued and unsettled me. It felt like I had uncovered something I wasn't supposed to, something that could change everything. But as I stood there, the weight of discovery pressed on me. What should I do next? Would anyone believe me if I told them about this room? Or should I keep this secret to myself? I turned around, the door to the hidden room now closed, and I found myself caught between the allure of the mystery and the responsibility of my role in the library. This wasn't just about books anymore. It was about something far deeper, far older than I had ever imagined. The book I chose from the secret room wasn't anything like I had ever seen before. Its cover was aged and worn, the pages yellowed with time. There were no titles on the spine, no recognizable author's name, nothing that could give me any hint of what I was about to uncover. But the weight of the book in my hands, the mystery it promised, was enough to compel me to take it home. When I arrived back at my modest apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery I had made earlier that day was significant. So, as the evening drew near, I sat down at my worn-out desk, the only place in my home where I felt comfortable to think, and opened the book. From the very first page, I could tell that this was unlike anything I'd ever read before. The writing wasn't like the usual books I'd perused during my years as a librarian. There was no simple prose or familiar rhythm. The sentences felt strange, as if they were written for a different kind of mind, a mind that had been aware of things I could never have imagined. As I read, each paragraph unraveled the world in a way that made everything feel both foreign and frighteningly familiar. The author, or whoever had written these words, spoke of the world's true nature, a nature that was hidden beneath the surface of our daily lives. It began with a startling claim that humans, all of us, were not the top of the food chain. We were, in fact, the subject of a grand experiment conducted by beings far more advanced than ourselves. These beings, referred to as the architects in the book, were not gods in traditional sense, but something much more alien. Beings who have been watching us for millennia, manipulating us, shaping our societies for their own purposes. The more I read, the more my reality began to unravel. The book described how the world's leaders, the presidents, the billionaires, the powerful elites we see on television, were not the true rulers of the earth. They were, in fact, nothing more than pawns in a larger game. The true rulers, the real kings of the world, were hidden from us. These were the architects, controlling events in the shadows, their influence stretching across every facet of life, from politics to economics to war and peace. It was hard to process, hard to believe. I had spent my entire life studying myths and legends, but never in all my years had I come across anything so disorienting, so terrifying. The book suggested that the society we lived in, the one that most of us thought we understood, was an illusion, a carefully constructed facade designed to keep us distracted and unaware of the real forces at play. The more I read, the more unsettling the revelations became. There were mentions of secret societies, of underground movements, and of ancient knowledge that had been passed down through generations, all serving the purpose of keeping the truth from the masses. History, the book suggested, was a lie, a tapestry of carefully woven fictions designed to obscure the true nature of our existence. I felt my heart race as I turned the pages, each new paragraph adding weight to the crushing realization that everything I had ever known about the world might be wrong. Could it be true? Could everything I had believed about our history, our leaders, and our purpose be part of some grand illusion? By the time I reached the final chapter, I was no longer sure what to believe. The words in the book spoke of a reckoning, of an inevitable moment when the truth would be revealed, when the architects would come forward to reveal themselves and bring about the next phase of their experiment. But the author warned that, by then, it might be too late for us to change our fate. As I sat back in my chair, the book closed in front of me, I felt an overwhelming sense of unease. The questions in my mind now outweighed the answers. What did this mean for me? For the world? Was I just a pawn, too? And if the truth was really out there, waiting to be discovered, what could I do about it? I had always prided myself on my love for literature, my ability to uncover new stories and ideas. But now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. Because sometimes the truth, when it's this dark, this unsettling, can be more terrifying than any myth or legend I've ever read. I couldn't sleep that night. The book had left me restless. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt this gnawing curiosity, an itch that could only be scratched by learning more. By the time the first light of dawn peeked through the curtains, I was already in my car, heading back to the library. I had to go back. There were more books, and I needed to understand, needed to know what came next. When I arrived, the library was quiet as always, the air cool and still. The scent of old paper and dust filled my nostrils as I walked through the aisles. But today, it felt different, more oppressive, as if something in the air was telling me to stop, to leave the secret room alone. But I couldn't ignore it. The pull was too strong. I went straight to the hidden room, the one with the lever and the secret passage. The door creaked open, and there was again rows and rows of strange, obscure books, their spines barely legible, their contents more mysterious than anything I had ever seen. I picked out another one, just as worn and nondescript as the first, and brought it back to the main table where I'd sat earlier. I sat down and opened the book, the weight of it pressing on me like a secret I wasn't meant to uncover. The pages turned slowly beneath my fingers, and as I read, the text began to unfold yet another layer of the terrifying truth. This book was different, more direct than the first. It spoke of the world as a giant machine, a system designed by beings that were not even human, beings far beyond our understanding. According to the book, all events in the world had a specific purpose, a reason behind them, and nothing happened by accident. Everything was controlled by something called the system, a board of elites, a secret council of 8 to 10 individuals who shaped the course of history, politics, and human society. But these individuals were not human at all. They were something else entirely, beings of unimaginable power, playing a game with humanity as pawns. The text described these figures as the controllers, who operated in the shadows, pulling the strings of governments, corporations, and even wars. They had the ability to manipulate events on a global scale, pushing humanity towards certain outcomes, often without us even realizing it. They had been doing this for centuries, carefully orchestrating everything from the rise and fall of empires to the global economy, even the very ideas and beliefs we held dear. What shocked me even more was the idea that we were all part of an experiment. The world, our lives, our struggles and triumphs, all of it was part of something much larger, something we couldn't comprehend. The system, as the book called it, was designed to push humanity in certain directions, testing our resilience, our morality, and our capacity to evolve. I could hardly believe what I was reading. It was like the walls of reality had started to crumble, and I was being shown the hidden gears of a machine that controlled everything. The text suggested that the elite, these controllers, were not bound by the same laws of time and space as we were. They were timeless, existing across different dimensions, using technology and ancient knowledge to manipulate human affairs. The more I read, the more I realized that I was no longer just an observer. I was part of this game, whether I liked it or not. The book hinted at a coming shift, a moment when the system would reveal itself, and the controllers would step into the light. But by then, it would be too late for any of us to change the course of history. I closed the book and sat back, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? I had spent my whole life studying myths and legends, but this was no myth. This was real, and it was happening right now. I felt like a puppet on a string, and the terrifying thought crossed my mind. Had I always been a part of this, even before I found the books? Was my entire life just another chapter in their story? The room around me seemed to close in, the air growing heavy. I stood up and looked around, suddenly aware of how isolated I was. I had no one to talk to about this. No one would believe me. How could they? I returned the book to its place in the secret room, my hand shaking. I wasn't sure what I had hoped to find in the pages, but now that I had seen it, I wasn't sure I could ever unsee it. The truth had been revealed, and now I was left to wonder if it was better to ignore it, or if I had been chosen, like so many others, to see what was hidden from the world. I left the library that day with more questions than answers, my mind spinning, the weight of the knowledge settling like a stone in my chest. What was I supposed to do now? Was there a way to fight back against the system, or was I just another cog in the machine? The answer, I realized, would have to come later. For now, I had to live with the truth. The world was not what I had thought it was. And I, too, was part of the experiment. As I left the library and walked back to my small apartment, the city around me seemed to blur. The usual sound of traffic, the hum of conversations, the clatter of life going on, it all felt distant, as though I was no longer part of it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somehow the system was aware of me now. I had seen too much, and that knowledge seemed to hang in the air like a cloud I couldn't escape. That night, I tried to sleep, but the book's words kept replaying in my mind. The controllers, the system, the endless manipulation of events. Everything I thought I knew about the world, about history, about power, it all felt like a carefully constructed illusion, and I was no longer sure if I was a player in it or just a passive observer. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little control I had over my own life. I had spent decades reading, studying languages, deciphering myths and legends, but never once had I thought that the stories I was so fascinated by might hold a deeper truth. Could the ancient gods, the stories of powerful kings, the heroes of old, all be part of the same game? Were they, too, pawns in a much bigger scheme? Was there even a way to break free of it? The next morning, I went to work at the library as usual, but nothing felt normal anymore. The place that had once felt like a refuge now felt like a prison. The walls of books, the quiet hum of pages turning, the soft murmur of visitors searching for knowledge. Everything seemed like a facade, a distraction from something far darker. Every person who walked in felt like another piece in the puzzle, their lives just as controlled as mine. I couldn't help but wonder how many people around me were aware of the truth, how many were quietly resisting, or perhaps, even worse, how many were complicit in it all. How many were simply going through the motions, as I had done for so many years. Later that afternoon, I ran into Sarah, one of the other librarians, and she greeted me with her usual friendly smile. I smiled back, but my mind was elsewhere, still reeling from everything I had learned. Sarah was a bright young woman, always eager to help visitors find the books they were looking for. But now I couldn't shake the thought. Was she in on it? Was she part of the system? Or was she just another innocent caught in the web? "Joe, are you okay?" she asked, noticing my distracted expression. "You seem a little off today." I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease. "I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." She nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. For a moment, I wondered if I should tell her about the books, about what I had learned. But I quickly realized that I couldn't. If I told her the truth, if I revealed what I had uncovered, there was a good chance she would think I was losing my mind. Or worse, that I was already part of the system's game, a pawn that had outlived its usefulness. I turned away and made my way back to the secret room. I couldn't stop myself from returning there. The need to know more, to understand the extent of the system's control, was overwhelming. But as I stood in front of the hidden door, ready to pull the lever once again, I hesitated. What if I wasn't meant to find these books? What if opening that door led to something much worse than just knowledge? Was I ready to confront whatever I would find next? But even as I asked myself these questions, I knew that I couldn't stop. Not now. The curiosity had taken root deep inside me, and it would never let me go. I pulled the lever, and the door creaked open. This time, the room felt colder, darker. The books seemed more foreboding, as if they were waiting for me to choose them, to delve deeper into the labyrinth of truth I had barely begun to explore. The answers I sought were just beyond reach, and I could feel them calling to me. As I picked up another book, my heart raced with anticipation. I didn't know what I would find this time, but I knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back. The truth was out there, hidden within those pages, and I was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The system, the controllers, the experiment, they were all part of a larger narrative, and I was becoming an unwilling character in it. But even as the walls of my world closed in around me, I felt a strange sense of purpose. The knowledge I had gained, the truth that had been exposed, could change everything. If I could understand it, maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to free myself from the grip of the system. Or, at the very least, expose it for what it truly was. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a role to play. A role in a much bigger story than I had ever imagined. And I wasn't going to let it slip away. As I held the book in my hands, a surge of pain shot through my skull, and my vision blurred. It felt as though the world around me was unraveling, and my mind was being pulled in 1,000 different directions at once. The images, they were flashing too fast to comprehend, too chaotic to grasp, but I could still feel their weight pressing down on me. People, screaming, fighting, burning, were everywhere, their faces contorted in agony, their bodies twisted in fear and rage. It was as if the book had unlocked something deep inside me, a terrifying vision of a future I couldn't fathom, a world on the edge of collapse. I dropped the book onto the floor, stumbling back as if the mere presence of it was too much to handle. My breath came in sharp gasps, my chest tight with panic. The world seemed too quiet now, too still. The normal hum of the library, the soft rustle of pages being turned, had faded into the background, replaced by the pounding in my ears and the chaotic images still swirling in my head. I shook my head, trying to clear the images, but they wouldn't leave. The pain in my head was unbearable, and my knees buckled beneath me. I collapsed onto the floor, my hands gripping the edges of the bookshelf as if to hold myself together. I couldn't make sense of it. What was happening? Why was this book doing this to me? As the pain slowly subsided, the images began to fade, but the feeling of dread lingered, like a shadow hanging over me. I looked down at the book, lying innocently on the floor, its cover gleaming in the dim light. How could something so beautiful, so deceptively harmless, cause so much turmoil in my mind? I stood shakily, my body trembling. My hands were slick with sweat, and I wiped them on my pants, trying to steady myself. But the question burned in my mind. What was this book trying to show me? I glanced around the secret room. The books here, these hidden, forbidden texts, had all seemed so innocuous at first. But now, After everything I had learned, everything I had seen, I couldn't shake the feeling that these books were more than just stories or knowledge. They were keys, gateways to something far more sinister, something that I wasn't prepared for. I bent down and cautiously picked up the book again. The title taunted me, as though it already knew the answer to the question I was too afraid to ask. Are you ready for the inevitable? Could I face whatever truth this book held, or was I already too deep in? I could feel the pull of the unknown, the allure of the answers that might lie within those pages. But at the same time, I could sense the danger. It wasn't just the pain in my head or the visions of destruction that had haunted me. No, it was something more, something darker. The system, the controllers, whatever this was, they didn't want people like me to know the truth. They didn't want anyone to understand the forces at play, the machinery working behind the scenes to manipulate our lives, to control us. They wanted us ignorant, blind to the bigger picture. And now, as I stood in that secret room, clutching the book, I realized just how dangerous it could be to uncover it all. But I had no choice. Something inside me, something deep within, told me I had to keep going. I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I wasn't ready. Not really, but I didn't think I had a choice anymore. I opened the book. The pages felt strangely cold beneath my fingertips, as though the book itself was resisting me. But I turned the first page, and as I did, the room seemed to shift around me. The walls of the library faded away, replaced by images, dark, twisted images of a world in chaos. People, cities, countries, all burning, all falling apart. The world I had known, the life I had lived, was disappearing, replaced by something far darker. The book didn't explain what was happening, at least not in a way I could understand. It spoke of inevitability, of cycles that couldn't be broken, of a system so vast and complex that even those who created it had lost control. It spoke of the end of everything I had ever known, the collapse of society, the rise of new powers, and the destruction of the old. But there was one word that kept repeating, one phrase that echoed to the pages. Awakening. Awakening. To what? To the truth? To a new world? Or to something much worse? I wasn't sure, but it was clear that this was only the beginning. The book wasn't just a guide. It was a warning that I had crossed a line, a threshold, and now there was no turning back. I closed the book, my hands trembling. The weight of it all settled on my chest, suffocating me. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I had to leave, to get away from it all, but I knew deep down that it wouldn't matter. The truth was already inside me, and it wasn't something I could forget. Whatever was coming, whatever was inevitable, I had already set the wheels in motion, and there was no escaping it now. The moment I opened the book, I felt an unsettling calmness in the air, as though I had entered into something far beyond the simple act of reading. The pages were old, worn, and the text was printed in a typeface I didn't recognize. As my eyes skimmed the words, they seemed to twist and shift on the page, like they were alive, trying to convey something deeper, something I couldn't fully grasp at first. The words weren't clear at first, the ink on the paper flickering in and out of focus, as if the text itself was not entirely meant to be read by human eyes. I blinked several times, my hands trembling slightly, but the message began to solidify, to sharpen. The more I read, the more I felt like I was being pulled into it, as though the very pages were drawing me in. And then I saw it, the sentence that made my blood run cold. You are invited to join the system. I couldn't believe what I was reading. What was this system the book spoke of? Was it some kind of secret society, or was it something larger, something far more sinister? I kept reading. The message wasn't just an invitation. It was a command, a demand, an ultimatum. The elites, these figures who controlled everything, offered me a place among them, but their offer came with a price. Refuse, the book warned, and everyone you love will be taken from you. They will perish, one by one, until there is no one left for you to hold dear. Accept, and you will become part of the new order. Your life will have purpose. You will have power. Deny, and you will watch them die. I could barely comprehend the weight of the words. The decision was clear. I could join them, become part of the shadowy system, or I could refuse and face the destruction of my family, the people I cared for, my children, my grandchildren. What kind of choice was that? Who were these people to make such a demand, to threaten everything I held dear? I felt nauseous. My head was spinning. I closed the book, desperate to stop reading, to erase the words from my mind, but the threat lingered, hanging in the air like an insidious fog. I could almost feel their eyes on me, the elites watching me, waiting for my decision. The thought of losing my family, of losing everything I had spent my life building, was unbearable. But how could I join them? How could I become a part of something that controlled everything, something that threatened death to those I loved? And yet, the pull was undeniable. The book didn't just offer power or wealth. It promised meaning, a chance to understand the true order of the world. It spoke of an awakening, of knowing things that no one else could know. It was tempting, almost seductively so. But what if I refused? What if I chose to fight, to stand against these faceless elites? Would they really carry out their threat? Would they really kill my loved ones? The thought haunted me. How could I be sure they wouldn't? I felt my chest tightening, my mind racing as I sat there, gripping the book with both hands. The choice seemed impossible, and yet it was right in front of me. They had made it clear that I couldn't escape it. Whatever this system was, it had already chosen me. I stared at the book for a long time, the words taunting me, asking me to make a decision I wasn't ready to make. I didn't want to be a part of this world, this system. But could I risk the lives of my family for my own ideals? Could I really fight against something this powerful? The thought of losing my family to their wrath was unbearable. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that even if I joined them, even if I played by their rules, I would never be truly free. The system, the shadowy force controlling everything, would never let me go. I would always be trapped, a pawn in their game, subject to their whims. But maybe that was better than the alternative. Maybe I could find a way to survive, to protect those I loved, without giving up my soul entirely. I closed the book, placing it gently on the table in front of me. I couldn't make a decision yet. I needed time to think, to understand what this all meant, but the weight of the choice was on me now, heavy and unrelenting. And I knew deep down that whatever I decided, it would change everything. There was no going back. The question remained, as it had from the beginning. Was I truly ready for the inevitable? The days that followed were a blur. My mind couldn't focus on anything but the book, the system, and the impossible choice I had to make. I continued my work at the library, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but every time I picked up a book or helped a visitor, my thoughts drifted back to that curse room, to the words in that book that had started to consume me. The elites were watching me. I was certain of it. The more I thought about it, the more I began to notice strange things happening around me. At first, they were small. Objects moved in my house when I was sure I hadn't touched them. Whispers in the corners of my mind late at night. Shadows flickering just out of view. I chalked it up to stress, to my overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. The system was real, and it had already begun to close in on me. I found myself returning to the secret room at the library every day, each time drawn to the blue book with the rune on its cover. There were other books in that room. 2 books that I hadn't yet touched, each one promising more knowledge, more answers. But I feared what I might learn. What if they were watching me right now, monitoring my every move? What if this was all some kind of test, some twisted game, to see if I would crack under the pressure? One day, I returned to the library to find the door to the secret room slightly ajar, a crack of light spilling from within. My heart raced. Was this a sign? Were they waiting for me? I entered cautiously, scanning the room for anything out of place. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust and age, but it felt different somehow, as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing with the knowledge of the ages. I approached the shelf, my fingers brushing lightly over the spines of the books. Then I saw it, another book, darker than the others. It was bound in black leather, with an intricate symbol on the cover. I reached for it, my hands trembling. As soon as I touched it, I felt an intense jolt of energy shoot through me, a sharp, painful sensation that made me drop the book to the floor. For a moment, I stood frozen, gasping for air, trying to steady myself. What was this? What had I just done? I bent down slowly and picked up the book, my hand still shaking. The symbol on its cover seemed to pulse, as though it was alive. I opened it, the pages brittle and yellowed, and began to read. This book was different. It wasn't like the others. It was dark, filled with warnings, and yet it spoke to me in a way that the others had not. It was as if it had been written just for me, to push me to make my choice. You are being watched. The first page read, "There is no escaping the system. You cannot outrun it. You cannot hide, but you can choose to join it, to embrace your destiny." The words burned into my mind, searing themselves into my thoughts. I felt a strange pull to the book, a compulsion to keep reading. But I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't something I should be reading. It was too dangerous. I slammed the book shut, but the feeling didn't go away. The weight of it, the knowledge, the decision. I could feel it pressing down on me, suffocating me. It was like a shadow, always there, always watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the weight of the book, the system, and the choice I had to make pressing down on me. I knew that the time was coming, that I couldn't run from this any longer. The system would make its move, and I had to decide what side I was on. In the quiet darkness of my room, I finally made up my mind. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, stuck between what I wanted to believe and what the truth was. I had to face the inevitable. It was the only way forward. But even as I accepted the truth of what I had learned, a part of me still resisted. How could I become part of something so monstrous, so controlling? How could I betray everything I believed in for the sake of power and control? But the alternative, fighting the system, refusing its offer, was worse. I couldn't bear the thought of losing my family, my grandchildren, and I was certain now, more than ever, that if I refused, they would be taken from me. There was no way out. I had to join them. I had to accept the inevitable. The next morning, I went back to the library, back to the secret room. The blue book with the rune was waiting for me, its cover gleaming in the dim light. I reached for it again, my decision made. This time, I would accept. I would join the system. And as I opened the book for the final time, I understood this wasn't just about power or control. It was about survival. The system had already won, and now I was a part of it. There was no turning back.